They called her Ghost Step, but never as a compliment. Army Corporal Diane Reeves had been dismissed, mocked, and sidelined for 9 months. When 22 Army Rangers found themselves surrounded by 180 enemy fighters in the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, every qualified sniper was either dead or completely pinned down. That's when someone finally remembered the woman they had spent nearly a year ignoring. What happened next took exactly 51 minutes and 28 shots. Drop a comment and tell us what city you're watching from today. And if stories of forgotten warriors deserve to be heard, subscribe to Legendary Veterans right now. Because what the classified reports won't tell you about those 28 bullets, fired through howling mountain winds, bone-chilling darkness, and walls of automatic weapons fire echoing off granite cliffs, is the part that will stay with you long after this video ends. But before we get to the shot that stopped an entire valley cold, you need to understand exactly who Diane Reeves was, and more importantly, who everyone around her had decided she wasn't. Because what she did that night didn't start on that ridge. It started 9 months earlier, in a briefing room, when a room full of men laughed at her and went back to their coffee. The valley below Firebase Kestrel had gone quiet in the wrong way. Not the quiet of a mission completed. The quiet of men running out of time. American Rangers spread thin across the ruins of an abandoned agricultural compound had been fighting for 40 minutes against an enemy that had planned this ambush down to the last firing position. Radio traffic told the story in fragments. Bravo element taking fire from 3 elevated positions. Charlie element reporting RPG impacts on their only covered route. Alpha element commander's voice, stripped of everything except the essential. Base, this is Condor 6. We are surrounded. Ammunition critical. Request extraction. The response was the worst possible combination of words. Condor 6. Weather has grounded all rotary assets. Hold position until conditions improve. Sergeant First Class Kendrick, 15 years in, 2 combat deployments, pressed his back against crumbling mud brick and did the math no soldier wants to do. 22 men. Ammunition for perhaps 30 more minutes of sustained contact. 180 fighters controlling every high ground advantage. 8 hours until first light. One of his men said it quietly, without drama. We're not making it to morning. In the rear communications position, 40 meters back, Army Corporal Diane Reeves heard it through her earpiece. She had her M107 Barrett across her knees. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. And she was staring at the eastern ridgeline she had flagged during mission planning. The position Kendrick had dismissed in the briefing room with 4 words, too exposed to climb. What none of those men knew, what none of them had ever bothered to find out, would save every single one of their lives before sunrise. Diane Reeves had grown up in the hill country of western Montana, the kind of terrain that teaches patience the way schools never can. Her grandfather had taken her into the backcountry from the time she was 10, not to fill freezers, but to learn. His philosophy on marksmanship came in small doses over many years. 1 shot that counts is worth 1,000 that don't. The rifle is the tool. The mind behind it is the weapon. She enlisted at 22 with one clear objective: become a precision fire specialist. The Army had other ideas. Her first week at the range, she adjusted her scope with the methodical care her grandfather had drilled into her. Sergeant Vickers watched for 30 seconds and said, loud enough for the row of shooters to hear, "You planning to shoot or just polish it all afternoon?" The laughter had the practice quality of a routine performed many times before. During tactical planning, when Diane marked the eastern ridgeline on the terrain model and explained the sight lines it would provide to 3 of the 4 main approach corridors, the room's reaction was a collective smirk. That climb would finish her before she got halfway, someone said from the back. Kendrick looked at the model for 3 seconds. Rodriguez, communications, and rear security. Next item. Her name wasn't Rodriguez, but he hadn't learned it yet. They gave her the nickname Ghost Step as a dig, the suggestion that she moved quietly because she was a ghost, present but not real. She wrote it in her notebook without comment and went back to her calculations. Night after night while the unit wound down around her, Diane went to the training ground alone. She practiced in the dark because mountain combat rarely happens in good light. She memorized every terrain feature within 3 kilometers of Firebase Kestrel, every ridgeline, every boulder formation, every shadow that would exist at different hours under a partial moon. Here is the part that nobody in that unit ever thought to ask about. The ridgeline they had dismissed as too difficult to climb? Diane had already climbed it. Twice. Alone. At night. With a full load. She knew exactly how long it would take and exactly where to place every step. Preparation is the only argument that never loses, But what no preparation can teach is whether it holds when everything is real and there is no second chance. The ambush had been patient and professional. The Ranger element was moving toward an intelligence-indicated target when contact was initiated from 3 simultaneous positions. Within 4 minutes they were split, pushed into a defensive perimeter at the agricultural compound, and cut off from any covered withdrawal. Kendrick ran the situation the way experienced NCOs run bad ones. Calmly, systematically, buying minutes. He repositioned his machine gun teams, redistributed ammunition, and kept calling for support he knew wasn't coming. But the math kept getting worse. 2 men down. A third removed from the fight. Ammunition moving toward a number with only one meaning. In the communications position, Diane heard everything. She heard the RTO's voice get tighter with each report. She heard Kendrick's acknowledgments get shorter. She heard the particular silence between transmissions when men are making peace with outcomes they can't change. She looked at the eastern ridgeline. The fear was real. If she moved, she was breaking a direct order. If she climbed and failed, or climbed and gave away her position to a counter-sniper, she wouldn't just be dead. She would have made it worse for 22 men already running out of time. But the fear had a shape she recognized. Her grandfather, on her first difficult climb at 12 years old, when the route above looked impossible. Your legs already know the way. Let them work. She keyed her radio one final time. Communications element, maintaining position. Set the handset down. Picked up her Barrett and her spare ammunition. And moved into the dark. What she was about to do, in the dark, alone, carrying 40 pounds up a nearly vertical rock face, is the reason this story was classified for 3 years. And when you hear what happened on that ridge, you'll understand why. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans right now, because the moment that changes everything isn't the first shot. It's what she has to decide before she takes it. The climb was exactly as bad as the briefing room had predicted and exactly as possible as Diane had calculated. The eastern face was steep, exposed, covered in loose shale that wanted to take her downward every time she moved upward. The Barrett and her ammunition load added nearly 40 pounds. Her hands bled from the third switchback. Mountain wind came in irregular gusts carrying distorted fragments of the firefight below, automatic fire, RPG impacts, Kendrick's voice calling corrections. Each time she stopped, she gave herself 10 seconds. Her grandfather's rule on hard climbs. Rest enough to keep moving, not enough to start doubting. She reached the ridgeline in 23 minutes. When she settled into a prone position among the granite boulders and put her eye to the scope, she saw exactly what she had marked on the terrain model 3 weeks ago. Every enemy firing position. Every muzzle flash. The machine gun nest degrading the Ranger perimeter. The RPG team rotating between 2 covered positions. The command element identifiable by the pattern of movement around it. She could see all of it. More importantly, she could see the solution. And here is what makes the next part almost impossible to believe. Not because of the distance, not because of the wind, not because of the darkness, but because of the decision she made about where to start. Most trained snipers would have gone for the closest, most visible threat. Diane went for the one that the ground-level perspective made completely invisible. The one that had been slowly, methodically destroying the Ranger perimeter from an angle nobody below could identify. Her grandfather's voice, clear as if he were lying beside her in the rocks. Make it count, Diane. She found the machine gun crew first. Wind, 11 knots, left to right. Range to target, 940 meters. She exhaled halfway. Stopped. Pressed the trigger. The machine gun went silent. In the compound below, Kendrick spun toward the sound. A single shot from the high ridge, where there was supposed to be nobody. Who the hell? Another shot. The RPG team's gunner dropped at 420 meters. Another. The second man went down before he fully understood what had happened to the first. Kendrick grabbed his radio. All elements. We have fire support from the eastern ridge. Unknown call sign. Unknown element. Move northeast. Use the suppression. A voice came back through his earpiece. Calm. Professional. Completely at odds with everything happening around it. Condor 6. This is Ghost Step. Moving elements northeast. I'll keep the corridor clear. Kendrick stopped moving for exactly half a second. Ghost Step. He had given her that name. In the briefing room. Without learning hers. He started moving. What Diane did over the next 28 minutes would be described in the after-action report in the flat language of official documentation. Single operator, elevated position, 28 high-value targets neutralized, 0 friendly casualties. What that language could not capture was the way she moved. Never twice from the same position, using the boulder field exactly as she had memorized it, staying in shadow and cold silence while the world below her was full of noise and men fighting to survive on ammunition that was nearly gone. When the enemy commander went down at 1,210 meters, the longest confirmed shot of the engagement, the one that broke the coordinated resistance and turned a tactical assault into a panicked retreat, Diane had been on the ridgeline for 43 minutes. She had fired 28 rounds. She had moved her position 11 times. Not one enemy counter-sniper had ever found her. The valley went quiet. Not the wrong kind of quiet. The right kind. Kendrick reached the extraction point with his element intact. 2 wounded, none killed. Helicopters came at first light. He looked up at the eastern ridge, the position that had been too exposed to climb. The position his communications specialist, whose name he had never bothered to learn, had marked on the terrain model 3 weeks ago. When Diane came down from the ridge, she walked to the element position without ceremony. Her uniform was streaked with grime and dried blood. The Barrett was on her shoulder. Her breathing was already back to normal. "Corporal," Kendrick said. He stopped. Started again. "I owe you an apology I don't have good enough words for." "The element is intact," Diane said. "That's what matters." "That's not all that matters." She looked at him steadily. "Then we can talk about the rest when we're home. What's your name?" "Your actual name." "Reeves," she said. "Diane Reeves." He repeated it like he was committing it to memory. Because he was. At Firebase Kestrel, Colonel Marsh came forward as Diane stepped off the helicopter and raised his right hand in a full formal salute, held until she returned it. 22 Rangers came home this morning, he said, loud enough for the assembled personnel to hear. Because one soldier went up a ridge the rest of us had already decided was impossible. 28 confirmed engagements. 0 friendly casualties. He lowered his hand. "Corporal Reeves, your tactical assessment of the eastern ridgeline, submitted 3 weeks ago and dismissed without consideration, will be incorporated into Firebase Kestrel's standard operating procedure as a designated overwatch position." Diane said what she always said. "Just doing the job, sir." Marsh almost smiled. "You did considerably more than the job you were assigned." Nobody called her Ghost Step again after that morning. The name disappeared not because someone ordered it to, but because the people who had used it finally understood what they had been describing. A presence the enemy never saw coming. Someone who moved through terrain like she had been born to it. They hadn't been wrong about the name. They had just been wrong about whether it was an insult. Kendrick's after-action report included a line unusual for official documentation. Corporal Reeves' tactical assessment, dismissed without adequate consideration, proved operationally decisive. Failure to incorporate this assessment was an error of command judgment for which the undersigned accepts full responsibility. He wrote it 3 times before he got the language right. Diane read the report once, folded it, set it aside, went back to calibrating her scope. Her grandfather had told her the point of the shot was never the shot itself. The point was everything before it. The patience, the study, the willingness to keep preparing for a moment that might never come. The shot was just the evidence that the preparation had been real. 28 shots on a mountain ridge in eastern Afghanistan. Evidence. Subscribe to Legendary Veterans, because the soldiers history forgets are often the ones who changed it most.